Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. Program presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Multiple ways for you to interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also hit us up on Twitter, hashtag GiantsChat. You can directly interact with the two of us. I'm at Lance Medow, one word, last name Medow. He is at Giants WFAN. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So the last show of the week before we turn our attention fully to the scouting combine, we're going to have a normal show here on Monday, then shows live from Indy Tuesday through Friday. It'll all be the same time, 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern. There is a new article up on CBS Sports that I want to get to, Paul, about free agent needs for all NFC teams. But let's start off from a big picture perspective about what the combine is all about and what teams look for. We don't necessarily have to get into the nuts and bolts in terms of the players, but there are, if you ask front office executives, and I was actually recently having this conversation with Bill Polian on SiriusXM NFL Radio,
right,
that they hone in on specific things that they're looking for. Most executives will tell you it's not getting bottled down in all of the drills, but there are certain measurements and standards, Paul, that they set. So if you watch a defensive lineman on film and you saw somebody flourish 2 or 3 years ago, you want the defensive lineman for this year to maybe match those measurements from previous years, because usually it's a good ballpark figure, indication-wise. There is the face-to-face interview, which teams get a tremendous amount of value because they get 20 minutes or so looking at a player in their eyes and seeing what they're all about. Sometimes they have a team psychologist involved in that meeting to provide analysis as well. And then probably the cherry on top, which is more valuable than any other component, is having access to the medical information. I would probably rank that number one.
It is number one.
I would put maybe the measurements as well as the meeting face-to-face, neck and neck for number two. But I would say those, to me, Paul, are the three main factors, substance-wise, that you get out of the combine.
Yeah, there's no doubt in terms of the combine itself. The ancillary benefit is that the GMs have access to all these agents who are floating around the hallways.
Yep.
There is a lot of conversation going on about those pending free agents that we were discussing yesterday. Trust me.
And fellow NFL executives, too.
No question. Whether it's in the hallways of the convention center or in the lobbies of the hotels, or for that matter, in the bars or the restaurants. It is nonstop NFL conversation. And, you know, to be honest with you, I've been in the stadium for the drills that you will see on television. NFL Network will televise all the drills in the stadium from the combine. I've been in the stadium for those, and I've watched those. And it's a unique experience. It's kind of fun. It's kind of different. But that's not where you glean your info. You know, where I get the crumbs the scuttlebutt that really helps me start to formulate some strong opinions coming out of the combine comes from all the other places. You know, whether it's in the media room or whether it's in the actual interview room where all the prospects come and sit at the different podiums and give out, you know, their interviews. What I really like a lot of times, just so people understand this, when they bring in, let's say, at 11 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday, they'll bring in, let's just for argument's sake, say linebackers, okay? And the linebackers will come in for 15 minutes at a time. They'll bring in waves, and they'll put them around the perimeter of the room at their own little podiums. And they'll sit there, and they would just wait for crowds of media to come, and sometimes it's a big crowd. A lot of times with your top 10 picks, that crowd could be 50 people deep, literally like a beehive around that guy's podium. You haven't been ever?
No, I haven't, but I'm very familiar with this setup, though. I know how it's
I didn't know if I was throwing you off.
No, I'm completely following.
And it gets to be really hairy, even trying to get your question in, because everybody is just jamming this guy for his 15 minutes, trying to get whatever their question is. Then you've got other players, and they're usually, you know, your third or fourth rounders maybe, who are at the combine. You go over to their station, and there might not be anybody there.
Well, it's an intimate interaction.
Or maybe,
it's a one-on-one,
or maybe there's only one or two reporters there. Now you get a chance to go over and talk to him, and maybe you cut your eye on him, you know. And in fact, I remember, I'll give you a great example. Darnay Holmes, during the combine, when he came to the combine, he was sitting at his podium, and Holmes was a known prospect. He wasn't like an underdog out of left field. People knew who he was. He played at UCLA.
Yeah, in the
right?
program.
And he was considered a very highly draftable player. So I was interested in him. He was one of the guys that I targeted that I wanted to talk to. I wanted to get a feel for him. And so when I went over to him, and there was only 3 people there. And I waited. They asked a couple questions, and then they walked away. So now I'm left. And so
lucky him, by the way.
Very lucky him.
Oh, tremendous.
And so now I'm starting to ask him questions about schemes that he played. I'm asking him about how comfortable are you in the slot. You know, if you're going to wind up being a nickelback, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about physicality? You know, you gotta come up sometimes on as a blitzer from the slot. You got to be able to produce run support. You know, what are your best skills? What do you think your biggest adjustment's going to be in the NFL? And I wound up peppering him with like 8 or 10 questions. When I got back to our set, I had already, like I said, I targeted him going into the interview process. This is a guy I was interested in already because I had watched tape on him. I came back to our set, and you could ask John or any of the people who were with us at the time. I said, I think Darnay Holmes would be a pretty darn good pick for the Giants on the start of the 3rd day. I would really like to see this guy get picked because I think he can play. I think he can play some slot. I like his attitude. I like his background. I like his answers. I've already felt good about him, but now after meeting him and just talking to him for even only a few minutes, I got a good vibe. Now, it's superficial. I get it. I'm not a scout. Okay, I'm not. I didn't do a half-hour interview process with him behind closed doors. I didn't see his medical files.
None of that. Put up the film and have him break down plays.
Exactly. I didn't have any of that. But I came away from that short opportunity to meet this guy, fortunately in a setting that was less crowded.
Yeah.
And I felt really good about him. And lo and behold, the Giants wound up taking him. And, you know, he's not okay for them. I mean, to some people he's been disappointing. To other people, they probably felt like, you know what, he's been an okay guy for 4 years.
And the biggest lesson for him was when he arrived in the Giants locker room, he knew to have at least 7 or 8 people in addition to you around him. So he never was exposed to a one-on-one situation like that ever again.
To deflect me.
So
no
it was
doubt.
it was a valuable experience, maybe more so for him interacting with you at the combine than vice versa.
Or how about this? Went up to Daniel Jones's podium, and there was only 2 people at Daniel Jones's podium. And my first question to him was about the comparisons to Eli Manning. I had a nice little chat with Daniel Jones at the podium that day, too. Kind of put that in the back of my mind.
I don't know how all of these players got so lucky.
I know.
Yeah.
So who am I going to talk to this week? I don't know.
They should have a warning for every prospect that comes to the combine.
Well,
that it's not necessarily always a good omen to be in your presence.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, you can probably put down some boxes of ziti that at least 1 or 2 of the guys who I talk to are going to wind up here.
Well, remember, you also have a track record of liking guys and they don't wind up here too when it comes to the draft. So I think the numbers have balanced out a little bit.
Some guys didn't work out. That's true too.
But that's just an idea of what the structure is in the layout of the land for the scouting combine. There is an article up on CBS Sports. They have all AFC teams and all NFC teams, 2 separate articles, and they have the needs and the projected cap space of every team in the NFL. So for the Giants, projected cap space is just under $19.5 million. And remember, these numbers are fluid. They evolve. They change. So I wouldn't really read so much into that. You could sign one contract, all of a sudden that number drastically changes.
Have you seen the day of the combine that the number is supposed to be coming out?
When they give out the salary cap numbers you're talking about?
The salary cap number is supposed to come out during the combine week.
Yeah, I'm not
but
exactly
I haven't seen
sure
the day.
Which day. But I would assume by midweek we should
Keep looking out for that, folks.
Yeah.
That's an important day.
There are a lot of individuals, though, that have already put out projections of what they think.
Well, yeah, Mike Florio says
Correct.
250.
Well, in addition to Florio, there's been plenty of other individuals. And I'm not just talking about the salary cap number. Also, the franchise tag numbers have also been projected. And usually those numbers are reasonable in that ballpark.
They'll be close.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking a difference of maybe 2 to 3 million here or there.
2 to 3 million could be a couple of players.
Sure.
Just remember that.
I think most teams, if you're going to give a franchise tag to a player, then you know that you're going to commit a good portion of money to that
Understood.
player. I think that's how they operate. Plus, here's the other thing that's important to note, and I'm actually glad you brought that up because you even brought this up yesterday. When the salary cap goes up, this idea that, oh, well, it's going to create so much space for every team. Remember, salaries run in the same direction of the cap. So that means everybody's salaries are going to little by little increase. So the quarterback salary is going to go up a little bit and the wide receiver. So it's not like you're creating an overwhelming amount of space. The whole point of why the salary cap goes up is the players want to make more money from an individual standpoint.
Yes.
So there's limited funding is my point that's going to be left all around.
I think there are 2 points to be made when the cap number comes out. Number one, yes, it can give you a little more room to maneuver in your bubble with your organization in terms of how much you are willing to spend on a particular player or a particular position. That it can do. It can help you in that regard. But from the other side, or the bigger picture, which is what I think you're alluding to, is that the number goes up for everybody. It's league-wide.
Yeah.
Okay? So that means every other team also has a little bit more room to potentially make an offer to your player as they try to steal him. So I won't say that it necessarily knocks it out or evens it out. I do think that for a number of teams, whatever additional salary cap money is allocated to this year's number above what they expected, for some teams, that will actually be a benefit.
Well, it could be a benefit.
For most teams, it probably won't be much because they're competing against the rest of the league. But for some teams, that few extra million is going to make a difference for them because they probably have a pretty solid structure as to what they want to do. And if they got an extra million or two to maybe get a 10-year vet on a 1-year minimum, well, guess what? All of a sudden, that $750,000 for that vet on the 1-year salary cap exemption minimum that they didn't have before because the salary cap went up $5 million. So it can make a difference to some teams.
Especially, I was going to say, the teams that are carrying over cap space from the previous season.
Oh, sure.
Those are the teams that really benefit because if you already go into this year with flexibility, anything else additional is essentially icing on the cake. And remember, teams need to set aside money for the draft, and they need to set aside money for getting them through the rest of the season due to injuries. So that's where I think it's extremely beneficial because maybe you were banking on allotting this amount. Well, now you got, let's say, 3-4 million in addition. So now you could go and spend a little bit more of the money you were allotting aside to go on players, such as your point about some of those seasoned veterans.
There's a third angle to the increase in the cap number that most people don't even consider, but you do have to consider it because in some cases it can be a factor. And that is if you've decided that you're going to move on from a player and you want to make him a pre or post June 1st salary cap cut, depending upon how you want to count his dead money. Well, all of a sudden now, if you find out that you have an extra $5 million in cap room that you did not have before, you may decide to change your mind in terms of which cap cut are we going to use on him, because now we've got a little more room to maybe absorb a little more dead money in the cap. So that could make a difference on when you decide to cut the fella.
So that is the projected number that they have under the Giants. Then they listed needs, and these are needs in free agency. You could also argue, though, these could be needs that they address in the draft as well. Keep that in mind. Now, I don't know if they put this, Paul, in order of priority. Some of them are in alphabetical order, others aren't, so I don't know what to read into it, and there really wasn't an explanation, but they listed a lot of positions for the Giants. Here's the list, and this is the list of the order that they put it in. And once again, I think you could read into this as much as you wish. Quarterback is listed as 1, guard, center, cornerback, defensive tackle, edge, wide receiver, and running back. And I always like to read and go through the little blurb just because sometimes that may provide some rationale as to where they were going.
Sure thing.
This is the following. Quote, Giants need a lot of work across the board. Daniel Jones still has another year of guaranteed money left on his contract, resulting in $47 million in change of a cap hit for next season. New York may be prepared to walk from Saquon Barkley as a result. Top priority for the Giants should be the offensive line, unit that allowed a league-high 85 sacks, most by any team since 1986, and a sack allowed per dropback rate of 14%. Drastic changes are needed to make that unit competent. New York could also use better veteran pass catchers, too. With Darius Slayton the only one worth retaining, Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt have a combined 3 seasons in the league. Keep in mind, Robinson has 1 season where he was banged up. For the Giants to contend, they need a competent offensive line, fix that, and go from there. End quote. So, just something to digest as we analyze some of these positions. Money was brought up, specifically for Daniel Jones, and the need for pass catchers. And, Paul, this goes back to the conversation, if you recall, we had yesterday, when a caller brought up about maybe not going after a wide receiver at 6.
Right.
And we said, well, wait a minute, hold on. You're assuming that all of these wide receivers are going to be healthy for the entire season, which you know is not going to happen. And we were also talking about you got to label them weapons, not wide receivers. And I think based on this description, they see it the same way that we were talking, where there's room to add another wide receiver if you believe that player can be a playmaker. And they reference the fact that there have been some injuries to that position, and also that Darius is really the one guy that has probably the most seasoning on him in comparison to other players at that position.
Right. Well, here's the problem, all right? If you're the Giants and you're picking at number 6, as we've discussed many times, if you have conviction about a guy, you've got to just take him flat out. That's it. You just take him. But if you don't, let's just say for argument's sake, even though we all seem to believe that there's at least 8 unanimous picks in the first 10, I think most people believe that they know 8 of the guys that are going in the first 10, and there may be room for 1 or 2 guys who might swap out.
Though quarterback is a bit of a wild card.
I think everybody figures 3.
No, I'm with you, but who knows? All it takes is another needy team makes a move, and maybe we get 4.
Yeah,
we've seen crazier things. Okay, that's all I'm going to throw.
But I think minimum 3. Minimum 8 out of the 10, we already know who those 8 players are going to be. Okay. So now, if you're the Giants and somebody does ring your phone and you don't have complete conviction on the guy that you want at number 6, you now have to figure out not only what is the overall take of the trade offer that you may get, because somebody does want to go up maybe and get one of those quarterbacks, but you also have to say to yourself, okay, how far down are we willing to go? And I think that is another very interesting part of any trade conversation. It's not just, are we going to get the collection of picks that we want as a price, but how far down are we willing to go in the first round if we're going to move down? I'll be frank with you. As I go into this combine, I'm not sure where my comfort level would be, how far down I would go. I suspect I wouldn't want to go down more than a handful of spots at most. There have been other times where we've been on this program, and certainly the Giants were a little bit closer maybe to the middle, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I could go down another 6 or 7 spots. It wouldn't bother me if I went down to 16, 18, 21, 22. Maybe that doesn't bother me because I just have a feeling that that's going to be okay. I don't know right now how far down I'd be willing to go, regardless of what the trade offer is. Do you have an idea? How far would you go?
Well, my response to you was actually going to be, I think number 6 is too valuable of a commodity.
You don't think you would trade it at all?
It's hard, Paul. I mean, when you look at the needs of this team, where this team is, and
remember, there are multiple needs.
Sure.
Remember that.
But when you start moving down the ladder, I think history of the draft has shown that the chances of that player becoming a franchise game changer, a Hall of Fame potential talent, a all-pro Pro Bowler does diminish, Paul. I think in fairness.
It does.
Okay?
I have the legitimate chart on this.
No, I know.
I've done it.
I mean, whether I have the numbers in front of me or not, I've seen enough that I think there's a great deal of validity behind that. So if we're talking about you go from 6 to 9, no, I don't think that's crazy. But if you start talking about you're going from 6 to 18, 20, that is a drastic jump the opposite way. Now, could the Giants move down, Paul, get resources, and then look to make a move up? Meaning you want to stack up chips, but now you like a player that's still on the board and you can maybe swap with a team. Maybe you can move up. I mean, we've seen teams do that. But once again, when you start leaving the territory of where the Giants are, you're giving up potentially on a talent, and I'm talking about at any given position, that could change the trajectory of one side of the ball for your team potentially.
It could.
Okay? It could. Not a guarantee, but it's a possibility. The only situation that would swing me to make a jump down is if you have no interest in taking a quarterback when you're on the board.
Right.
Meaning you don't like anyone that fits that profile, but a team is itching. I mean, they are scratching like they got eczema on both hands, okay? And that rash is growing.
Well, that's the way the Jets were when they were traded up to get Darnold.
Correct.
They told the Colts, come on, just come in here and take every
but that wasn't
addressed.
If I'm correct, weren't the Jets like 6 or something, and they moved up to 3? So that wasn't crazy.
Well, that's what a lot of people want the Giants to do.
Well, but I'm talking about a team.
A lot of people do.
Well, but I'm talking about, Paul, a team in the teens that has interest in a quarterback. Okay. So this is a sizable.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to 8 to 6 or some minute jump. I'm talking about you get a phone call, you don't want to take a quarterback, they're in the teens, they need to move up, and they're enamored with this guy. And you're listening, and now they're talking shop, and they're willing to give you an offer that is very hard to pass up.
A boatload.
Okay? Yeah.
Okay.
That's when I start listening, and I say, okay, that's something worth heavily considering, because the group of assets that you would be getting in return, and who knows, maybe you get a proven veteran. Remember, in some deals like this, we've seen established players be involved too.
Yes.
That's when you have me listening a little bit closer.
Okay.
But anything short of that, once again, I return to number 6, I think, is too valuable to pass up.
Okay. I'm going to give you one piece of historical evidence that I gave to Howard Cross on the show the other day. It may or may not change your mind. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just offering you more fruit to chew on.
Yep.
I did a study, NFL draft beginning in 2000 through 2020, because anyone taken in 2021 is still on their rookie contract.
Okay.
So therefore, I wanted to exclude 21, 22, and 23.
So a 2-decade period.
So it's a last 2-decade period.
Yeah.
Overall picks between 1 and 10, only 55% of them have made at least one Pro Bowl.
Well, but that's still a pretty good percentage.
55%.
Yeah, that's half. More than half.
If I said to you, give me the over-under before I gave you that number, you would have probably said 70. You certainly, if I said to you 55, you would have left.
I would have went that high. Maybe I would have went into the 60s, Paul, but in fairness, remember, we do use the term inexact science left and right. There's a reason why we say that.
We do, because we know we work in this industry. I don't think most people out on the street would have believed 55%. They clearly would have gone higher.
I mean, I think that to me is lacking perspective based on how the NFL works.
Look what we're talking about. You know, a lot of times, without the data in front of them or the information in front of them, it's easy to get carried away. And by the way people salivate over these top 10 picks, you'd swear that everybody believes those guys are going to the Hall of Fame, and they're not.
Well, you know what, though? I think realistically, if you understand the ins and outs of the draft, that would bring that number down in anyone's mind is if 3 or 4 quarterbacks are taken fairly early in the draft, most years, right? I mean, there's exceptions. The chances, Paul, of all 4 of those guys panning out is slim.
I happen to agree. You don't have to convince me of this.
I'm not trying to convince you. We're just having a conversation. What I'm saying is that quarterback track record, by default,
is not very good.
Bring down the number.
It absolutely does.
And that's my point.
Okay. Picks 11 to 20, 44%. Do you like that number?
45. Well, now we're dipping. Clearly.
Okay.
But this is Pro Bowl only. This is not all pro.
No,
Hall of
this
Fame.
is guys who have made at least one Pro Bowl.
Okay, but what I'm saying is,
which, as I said to Howard, to be frank with you, these numbers are even high because Howard brought up, and I said, absolutely, Howard, I get you, but I wanted to establish some sense of standardness to this whole thing.
Okay.
He goes, well, guys make the Pro Bowl if they were 7th on the depth chart. Everybody dropped out.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to tell people is that top 10 picks are not a sure thing. They're far from it. And so if only 55% made a Pro Bowl, and then from 11 to 20, 44% made a Pro Bowl, and from 21 to 30, 33% made a Pro Bowl.
Well, but you're dipping as you go down, though.
Well, of course you are.
So that's my point.
So the question becomes, if you're going to get a package of picks and potentially drop out of the top 10 and go from the 55 percentile to the 44 percentile, what is the collection of picks that you need to go into that 44 percentile, which could take you all the way down to 20?
Well, first of all, if you move from 6 to 20, you're probably talking about assets for the following year.
Oh, no question.
And you have no idea where the team that you're swapping with is going to wind up drafting.
I'm probably not going down that far, to be frank with you. I'm only comfortable with a few spots, but I'm simply throwing out that hypothetical because that's what we do right now as we go into the draft.
Sure, but
everything's hypothetical.
Going back to our initial conversation, my point is you need to take a move that far down to get a sizable package that I think impresses you to feel good about leaving 6. That's my point.
Let's put it this way. If you had to leave the top 10 and went into the next grouping of 10 and your chances of landing a Pro Bowl player are only 11% less, is that going to significantly hinder your desire to make a move? I guess that's the question I'm asking you.
If we're talking about a difference of 11%, no, I don't know if it would hinder. I think that probably would be too strong of a word. I still think I'd be open to it. But once again, I don't think from the Giants' perspective, if you make a trade like that, to me, it's not just about what you're going to get out of the 2024 draft.
There's no question. It's about what you're getting down the road.
Correct. And who knows where, once again, the team that you're swapping with ends up. Whether it be a 2025 pick, a 2026 pick. And I know a lot of individuals are listening and saying, well, they need all the assets they can get in 2024 to help move the process forward.
They could use some stuff in 25, too.
Without a doubt. So you can't look small-minded just through the lens of 2024. And even without making the trade, Giants have a nice group of relatively high picks this year in terms of, top 70, top 80 picks. Not a bad situation that they're currently in without even making a move.
Yeah. I'll let it go there.
No, interesting numbers. What I would be interested
I felt compelled to at least give them to you because it was interesting to me, and it did give me some food for thought.
I would be interested, and I guess maybe on the surface you would claim, well, wait a minute. If you made a Pro Bowl, then in all likelihood you made an All-Pro and you got to the Hall of Fame. Hard to believe that the Pro Bowl didn't. No, I'm saying if you would have taken Hall of Fame, All-Pro, Pro Bowl. And to make it even further.
The number would be a lot lower.
Really? You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know about that, Paul.
Yeah, because there are a number of guys who make the Pro Bowl who don't become all NFL. There's a smaller that go the other way. But Pro Bowl guys, the Pro Bowl number, remember, you can have multiple guys because guys are dropping out because they don't go or they get hurt.
Sure.
And all of a sudden you're 6 on the depth chart and the guy makes the Pro Bowl. All NFL, the AP votes, and it's 2 guys, at every position, first team, second team,
limited
All-Pro.
Spots. Yeah.
There is no dropping out. So if they're taking 6 nose tackles to the Pro Bowl by the time they get to number 6, well, the nose tackle spot only has 2 in the all NFL voting, the All Pro voting.
Sure, but I would find it hard to believe that there wasn't a lot of overlap, I guess is my point.
If you really want me to take the time, I'll go through that chart.
I'm just throwing that out there.
This chart took me enough time to do.
Oh, I'm sure it did. I mean, heck, you could even throw in individual awards. Guys that won MVP or NFL Offensive Player of the Year.
Anyway,
NFL Defensive Player
it's 4 picks in the first 70 for the Giants or 5 in the first 108.
Yeah. And that's a nice volume.
It's very nice.
Going in. So you got to look at that as another consideration, Paul. before you say, okay, we need to get more for 2024. That's why a trade like that is, to me, maybe what you get the year after.
The other part is move up. And not in the first round, but maybe you decide, you know what? We want more in the second round.
So
Maybe
you package something.
Maybe you package, and as part of the deal, you try to get a third, second round pick.
Sure.
Or you try to get back in at the bottom of the first round, which is unlikely, but to add a second or a third or moving up in those 2 rounds is always a possibility.
Yeah, and it depends. Listen, you could feasibly move into the lower rankings of the first round if the team that you're talking to doesn't think there's a drastic difference between a high second-round pick and a
Anything's
low
possible.
First round. You know, there are some
Unlikely,
years,
but it can happen.
but there are some years where the lower first-rounders are second-rounders. So teams say, what's the difference? And based on the rookie pay scale, you benefit as a result of that.
Sure.
Few reminders before we open up the phone lines. Giants Huddle Podcast. You can check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You go to giants.com/podcasts. As we move forward to 2024, you can take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV. It brings you original video content, game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines. We got Chris in Paramus joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Chris? What do you got for us?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
All right. What's on your mind?
So I want to talk about Daniel Bellinger, who, in my opinion, is the most underrated player on this roster. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife, inline tight end. He can, pass catch and play action. Pseudo fullback. He had a lot of production in 2022. He was under Andy Bischoff's tutelage. If anybody's not familiar with Andy, he was coming from Baltimore. He helped the development of Mark Andrews.
Yeah, but he's now gone.
Right, yeah, unfortunately, yeah. But coming off that 22 production, in the offseason of 22, he attended the Tight End Academy.
Yep.
And George Kittle was actually quoted as, praising him as a top up-and-comer. And he kind of got shelved in 23. Now, that could be part of the reason why that the Waller addition and that trade.
Well, that's a big reason why.
But yeah, I just think that he could be a much, much larger part of this offense because he's so, flexible in terms of position. And, now that it's draft season, I hear about Brockers potentially being the number 6 pick. And, I think is not as large of a hole at tight end as I think a lot of people think. I think, Daniel Bellinger could be the number 1, given, Waller's health issues. But it's a lot to chew on, but I just wanted to get your guys' take on Bellinger as a player, Bellinger's future, because, it's kind of got on the shelved a little bit in last year, and I don't know what the reasoning behind that was. But
well, once again, I'd point to the arrival of Waller and appreciate the phone call, Chris. The other thing is, and I'm bringing up his numbers, Paul, and this to me tells it all, Bellinger played a full season in 2023. Remember, he had the eye injury in his rookie year. So he plays 5 more games, yet he has 7 less targets this season.
62% of the snaps compared to 72% as a rookie when Waller was not here.
Correct. So that, to me, is the biggest reason. I know Waller missed some time due to injury, but Waller did play, at least in the early stages, and then came back. And, that's going to take away opportunities, at least in the passing attack, for Daniel Bellinger.
See, I happen to like Daniel Bellinger a lot. I do think he would probably tell you he was disappointed in his season this past year. There were a number of blocks and pass protection that he did not get the job done as well as he would have liked. I'm sure he would tell you that if he was sitting here. His pass catching was fine. He averaged 10 yards a catch. He made some plays, and he's not a 1,000-yard receiving tight end though. That's not him. And the Giants, without a 1,000-yard receiving receiver, wanted a 1,000-yard receiving tight end, so they went out and traded for Darren Waller.
Especially given the limitations at wide receiver and
now,
the injuries.
If you had a bona fide game-breaking stud at wide receiver who was a lock for 1,000 yards, Well, then perhaps a tight end like Bellinger, who is not that particular threat, would be a much easier fit into your system. But if you don't have that game-breaking wide receiver and you're looking to the tight end to be your 1,000-yard threat, well, that's why Waller was acquired. And I don't think that situation's going to change this year. What I will say is this. Whether or not the Giants go out and get a receiver at number 6 or even later on, I do think you will probably see more double tight end sets this season than you saw last year. And some people are going to say, well, you're crazy. Because if they draft a receiver and they've got Hyatt and they've got Robinson and they've got to do if they have a Slayton, they're going to say to me, and you have Hodgins, they're going to say, well, why would you not get these guys on the field? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that the Giants are going to buck the current trend in the NFL, which is getting a little bit away from that 3 wide receiver set and becoming more and more run-oriented. And when you start to become a little bit more run-oriented or have a better balance, you start to play more 2 tight ends, or you decide you're going to add a fullback, which almost half the teams had a fullback this year on the roster.
Well, including the Niners, Kyle Juszczyk.
No question. Now, I don't know that the Giants are going to go fullback. I don't get the feeling from this coaching staff that they want a fullback. But do I think you could see more double tight ends? They did a significant amount of double tight ends in 2022, and they made the playoffs. Let's not forget that. Everybody thought they'd be strictly 3 wides like almost all the time, and they didn't. They shocked people because Kafka and Dable were supposed to be more pass-oriented guys, and in 2022, they ran the ball better. Maybe the Giants need to go back to that 2022 playbook a little bit, too.
I think Bellinger is the perfect...
And he fits in that.
Correct. But he's the perfect component to a 1-2 punch at the tight end position. Meaning, you're not going to put him on an island, but you can have a nice room if you have him and a Waller or another explosive player. Because Bellinger gives you the blocking component, but he also can fill in if your number 1 guy gets hurt, and he can prove to be a reliable option in the passing attack.
He's a good player.
A lot of great plays in 2022, especially up the sideline and running after the catch. Bellinger has proven his wealth and his health, too, which is important. I mean, the eye injury, that was one of those freak accidents. Other than that, he stayed pretty durable in his first 2 years of the NFL. But, yeah, based on the last caller's point, you and I have had conversations, or maybe it was John and I don't think the Giants need to go all out to add a tight end. I think between Waller and Bellinger, you're in a good position. If they want to sign a veteran out there on the free agent market, somebody that has several years to add more to the room, that's fine. But I don't know if they have to use high draft capital
I wouldn't.
On that position.
I wouldn't at all.
I don't think they're in a position that they need to do that.
Just as a matter of comparison, this past season, the Giants ran the ball 458 times and averaged 4.1 yards per carry, okay, for over 1,800 yards. In the playoff season, and again, this just goes back to proving what's becoming very obvious in today's NFL as the tide starts turning the other way, 520 rushes for over 2,500 yards and a 4.8-yard average. They ran the ball more, they had more success with the run, and they made the playoffs. Just saying.
They were tied for 5th in the NFL in rushing yardage in terms of yardage per carry, to your point.
In 2022.
With the 4.8, because I have those numbers in front of me. They dipped to 16th in the NFL in yardage per carry.
And,
in 2023.
and that's a product of a healthier Barkley, a more functional offensive line that was able to stay together and produce at a higher level, and more of a commitment to the run. Even though you had a healthy Daniel Jones that year who played well, had maybe his best season. Even with that, okay? Even with that, and a wide receiving core that was badly banged up, your running game was really the linchpin that helped get you into the playoffs.
Well, you could argue, based on what you just mentioned, out of necessity, they had to be heavily run-oriented.
But
your quarterback was a big component of that, and he was on the field for every game.
He was.
Whereas now...
And he was a part of that, too. Which,
correct.
Again,
so I think that did impact the numbers.
I get that. I get that. Nothing's in a bubble. I always try to tell you folks that. It's a spider web, the NFL. Nothing is in a bubble. So I don't want to be too restrictive to the thought, but that was a main component. We could talk about some of the other ancillary factors, but the main component was they ran the ball significantly better in 22 than they did in 23. And that clearly was something that benefited them. That's not debatable. Now, I will say this, okay? Every offensive lineman will also tell you it's easier to run block than it is pass block.
Sure, going forward as opposed to backwards.
They'll tell you that all the time. So as you continue to try to reconstitute this offensive line with a new offensive line coach and maybe, again, import some guys, we don't know exactly how it's going to shake out, but the offensive line has to produce better. Maybe it's going to be easier for them to improve if they become more run-oriented.
Well, I would say regardless of the personnel they bring in this offseason, I'm talking about the weapons at the skill positions, I think there should be more of an emphasis on the run game, just to avoid putting quarterbacks in a position where they get hit 85 times like they did last season.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, you can't afford to do that.
The byproduct is also try to keep your quarterback healthy, too.
Yeah.
Now, and I even say this with the early suggestion before the combine that says based on how the picks are probably going to fall out, because John keeps asking me all the time, well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I said, well, if they fall out the way it's going to fall out, right, they'll probably have Odunze and Neighbors are probably going to be available at 6. You're probably going to get a chance at one of those two superstar receivers. Would you take one? Yeah, right now, my gut feeling, even after everything that I've said, would probably be to take Odunze. And I've said that on this show before. I reserve the right, when I come back from the combine, to have a different opinion. This is strictly premature. I have not done any of my combine intel. But that's okay, because you can take a guy like Odunze, who can make impact plays and big plays, and be used in a limited role as a rookie. You could still be more run-oriented this season as he works himself in as a rookie, and he could still make several big plays like Hyatt did this past year. He made a number of big plays. You would want more out of Odunze. But you don't have to become a huge pass-oriented attack just because you draft a wide receiver at 6.
Well, and also as it stands right now, I don't think that'd be wise based on how the team is currently constructed, even if you add Odunze.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You could still take him. I don't want people to say, well, how could you even suggest taking Odunze and at the same time talk out of the other side of your mouth and say, stress the run a little bit more. No, I think you can actually do both.
Well, and remember, you're not drafting Odunze just for 2024, too.
Absolutely.
So just because you're run heavy in 24 doesn't mean it's not going to change 25 or 26.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't get caught up in analyzing picks for 1 year. It's not how it works. In the NFL, you want more than one season out of the player. And what's also a key component of a really good run game? Wide receivers that block up the field. Okay, let's not forget about that.
Hence another reason why I like Odunze over Neighbors. Bigger body, bigger frame, stronger, more physical.
Yep. So I would argue you actually are helping your run game, even if you bring in a wide receiver.
Yes, sir. I'm on board with that.
Because if you want to get that guy to the second level, the wide receiver is going to help. It's no coincidence that, and I always love to use examples around the league, one of the big reasons why the Niners were able to showcase Christian McCaffrey, yes, they have Trent Williams and their offensive line produced. But go back and look at McCaffrey's runs to the second and third level. And, Paul, you're going to find Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk out in front of him, blocking to give him an additional 5 yards. If he doesn't get that, Niners' run game's not nearly as explosive, no matter what you think of McCaffrey.
Don't forget about what they do to the corners when they seal the edge either. Or downfield, they just start taking a corner out, and all of a sudden a 5-yard run is a 15-yard run.
Those guys are all effective in the blocking game, and they have a desire to do that too.
I used to joke all the time with Plexico Burress, who was not known for his run blocking proficiency, but he was a big frame.
Takes up space.
And I always joke with him. I said, with your frame, you just got to get in the way. He goes, that's it, man. I just got to get away. And that's what he would do.
Yeah.
Most times, Plexico would just get in the way, and it was enough to spring the back. He didn't necessarily have to block. He just had the space-eating frame that if he just got in the way, it served to do its purpose.
Just be an obstacle.
That's it.
Even if it's for 2 seconds, be an obstacle.
That's it. Be a hurdle.
Yes, so that they got to look around you, above you, they got to jump, you name it. Let's head back to the phone lines. Mac is in D.C. joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Mac?
Hey, guys. First-time caller. Just want to say you guys do a great job, and I really appreciate it. I actually look forward to this every day.
Well, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Following up on the wide receiver chatter, I did want to inquire about Bryce Ford Wheaton. I know PDOT loves his skyscrapers, and I know we signed this guy as an undrafted free agent. Unfortunately, he got injured. But we invested, I think, a decent amount of money to make him choose us over other teams. And, with the number 6 pick, I'm not saying that we can't, pick a wide receiver there. But how do you think that comes into play? His recovery, his process, and do you guys know anything about that? His how he's projecting at this point? I kind of would like for him to come back like Wan'Dale Robinson did this year after the surgery. He came back maybe mid-season and was able to.
Sure, but I mean, think about how long it took him, Mac, to get back and make an impact. That's why I don't think when a guy's coming off a torn ACL, I don't think you could bank on that player being ultra productive for all 17 games and being back to his old self. Also, unlike Wan'Dale Robinson, Ford Wheaton hasn't played one regular season snap in the NFL. And if you're going to draft a wide receiver at 6 and you take into consideration all the guys that are under contract, maybe tough for him to make the roster. Remember, he's got to make the 53. Before you even talk about his potential impact, he's got to find the spot on the 53-man roster. And that's no given based on the volume that we're talking about at that spot.
And to be honest, we have not heard anything at all, anything, since he got injured as to where he stands. So it would be totally unfair for me to give you an opinion or a comment because he has really not been on the radar at all. Now, for his sake, I hope he has an opportunity to come back and compete because there's certainly room to compete here.
Now, that was the 3rd preseason game against the Jets. Just understand when he was injured. So, I mean, he's had the entire year to get ahead of the process compared to a Wan'Dale Robinson who was hurt, I want to say, in Week 11, his season when he tore his ACL.
Yeah, it was.
I think it was Week 11 against the Lions. I know it was against the Lions. I just don't remember which week it was.
It was past the halfway point.
I'm pretty sure it was 11. So a little bit different in terms of the timeline, but I think the difference, once again, Mac, between him and Wan'Dale is Wan'Dale got on the field, was a high pick, proven talent to a certain degree. Ford Wheaton hasn't gotten to that point, so it's a bit of a more uphill battle. So right now, without knowing where he is and how the rest of the roster is going to shake up, I wouldn't bank on him absolutely having a place on the depth chart.
I get it. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, you got it, Mac. Appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring.
An intriguing prospect, to say the least, though. You know, I wouldn't deny that. He is not a burner. He is a big framed receiver who will be a possession guy. But he's certainly not a burner or a game breaker or an impact receiver. He is more of, you know, again, he is a possession guy. That's what he's going to do. It remains to be seen. Again, we're going to go into this like we do every August. How many receivers do you keep?
And you don't
And
know.
can you play special teams? I don't think he's a special teamer in any way for me. I don't know that.
Well, there's
right
not
now.
enough. Yeah, I mean, you can't see what he could potentially do on the NFL level because all you have is what he did in college. The other thing that comes to mind player-wise is Colin Johnson, because I feel like we were having similar conversations about Colin Johnson, right? Here is a guy with size, NFL experience, missed all of 2022. We were talking about him for this year, right? And he never even made the roster.
Right.
But Johnson at least had NFL tangible evidence, Paul.
I
Ford
know.
Wheaton doesn't have any of that.
Well, to be frank with you, Isaiah Hodgins has some size. He's a possession receiver. showed a really strong proficiency during the final third of the playoff season in 2022, and then last season was really quiet. To be frank, if you look at his stat line, he was very quiet. Do you know for sure if that's what you're going to get out of him this year, or is he going to be more of the guy you saw in 2022? Right now, I think it's only fair to say you don't know.
And let's be realistic.
Could he be beaten out? Maybe he could. I don't know.
But I was going to say, if we're going to be realistic, if this passing attack is going to take it up a notch and head to the next level,
he'll have to be better.
Well,
he has to be.
Yeah, but I was going to say it's going to be a product of the main guys all delivering and stepping up. Meaning, if you're banking on Ford Whedon being the X factor,
right.
I'm bringing it back to that. I think that tells you all you need to know.
Well, the only thing, you can't bank on it, but you can't discard the fact that Victor Cruz's rookie season was lost with a hamstring on IR, and then what happened? He became one of the most dynamic receivers in the entire league. So you can't just throw the guy in a closet and say, look, you were on injury reserve as a rookie. You can't be part of the solution. No. Maybe he could be. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, could be an option in depth also.
But you don't bank on it.
Yeah.
You can't.
The other thing is, I think the offenses were in different situations.
Well, sure.
In terms of 2010 to 11 versus 23 to 24. And you also had Eli Manning under center. Far more experienced, proven, durable quarterback.
Again, circumstances different.
Well, but that makes
no question.
So, meaning
everything makes a difference in this league.
In those situations, Paul,
everything
you want to
does.
talk about Victor Cruz a little bit? I'll give you that. In this situation, you need Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. You add somebody at 6, the tight ends. That's the make or break. Okay, not somebody that may be returning from a torn ACL that hasn't played one NFL snap.
Those guys need to stay on the field, and they need to produce at their potential, not just maybe at the back of their football card. That's not good enough. They need whatever their potential is. They need to ball out, is what they need to do.
Well, even if you go back to, and I like to talk about the turnover rate in the NFL. If you look at the teams that missed the playoffs in 2022 and then made it in 2023. And you look at, well, how did they flip the switch?
Mm-hmm.
It's highly unlikely that you're going to find it was a product of an undrafted wide receiver or tight end come to the rescue. And I brought up the teams, okay? So the 3 new arrivals in the NFC this year, the Lions, the Rams, and the Packers, they did not make the playoffs in 2022.
Right.
Okay. So why did the Lions make the postseason? They had a really good draft. Okay?
No question.
Those first rounders
great draft.
Specifically all contributed. But Jared Goff and the offense had been together. The defense under Aaron Glenn. But even if you look at both sides of the ball, I'm telling you, you're not finding an unsung hero that was undrafted. Most of them are notable names. Okay?
With the Rams, it was Nakua.
But a drafted guy.
Drafted, but nobody thought he was going to be this impactful.
A later-round guy, but drafted. Not somebody that was an undrafted free agent that they brought in.
He produced at an all-pro level and had no business doing that coming into the league.
But they went through the draft process to find him.
Yes.
And that, to
Fair
me,
enough.
is a big difference. You also got Cooper Kupp back from injury.
Sure.
Okay? Matthew Stafford returned from injury.
Mm-hmm.
But those are your proven commodities, Paul.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the comparison to what I'm talking about when I list all the Giants players. With the Packers, okay, Jordan Love had a really good season in his first year as a starter, okay, but that was somebody he used a first-round pick on. And even the young wide receivers were all drafted. They weren't guys they plucked off the street.
You're right.
Okay? So I think you'll learn a lot about the rest of the league. And if we were to do this with the AFC, Steelers, Browns, Texans were the 3 teams that did not make the playoffs in 2022, made it in 2023. Well, let's face it, Pittsburgh is always mathematically in the mix ever since Tomlin was the head coach. So, they miss by a game or two. They never drastically fall off a cliff. So the Steelers are not a good example if you're looking at a team to make a sizable jump. Houston is interesting because the Texans, relatively young team, well, they drafted a quarterback who made some really good decisions as a rookie. But even if you look at the weapons around C.J. Stroud, right? Because that tells a big part of the story. You're also going to find players that the Texans use draft capital in. Tank Dell, before he got hurt, third-round pick, 2023.
Sure.
Nico Collins, third-round pick in 2021. John Mechie, second-round pick in 2022. And he dealt with, obviously, cancer and came back out onto the field.
Right. I got you.
Okay. Devin Singletary, they signed in free agency. Dalton Schultz, former Cowboys tight end. You're not looking at a Bryce Ford Whedon. And I'm not doing this exercise to bring down Bryce Ford Whedon. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm saying from the Giants' lens. No, and I'm not saying that you're.
I tried to calm the caller down. He wanted to put him
I don't know if the caller was trying to put him in Canton.
Well, he was hoping that the guy could be part of the answer.
Maybe his potential.
My response is there's always a chance. I would never close the door on a guy. I understand his excitement in the player from watching him at West Virginia. I get that. But, don't close the door on him, but don't bank on him either.
Correct.
That's all.
Yeah. And that was the point of me going through these other teams, because the Giants are the same position, right? They're looking to bounce back, looking to get back into the playoffs, but you see young players who were scouted and developed thanks to the coaching staff, not some of these gems that appeared out of nowhere. So the Giants are going to move forward. It's got to come from the recent draft classes. And, Paul, we had this conversation entering 2023, that it wasn't going to be just about the 2023 draft class, right? It was going to be, could you get a little bit more out of 21, 22? The combination of all of these classes. And if you go back to the Giants draft, their history, in recent history, no matter who they bring in here in 2024, it's got to come from the players that showed flashes as rookies doing more than just showing flashes. Okay? That's what it has to come from. For example, Micah McFadden had a tremendous season. Can Micah McFadden duplicate what he did in 2023? Right? Isn't that going to tell an awful lot?
You got to do better than that.
Okay. Well, my point is
not just duplicate.
That's fine. I'm with you.
You know, when you're a young player and you get to your third and fourth season, man, you still got to show some ups there. You can't just flatten out in year two and say that's what we're going to be. You still want improvement in the third year, and that's where you really the old mantra is your third season. That's where you really better show that you belong.
And then from that same draft class, okay, Wan'Dale Robinson had a nice second half of this past season. Can he stay healthy, and could he put it all together for 17 games? Evan Neal was a part of that draft class, okay? Are you going to get him to stay on the field? Cordell Flott, Paul, was a part of that draft class, and you've brought him up as a valuable component in the secondary, but he's also dealt with some injuries. We were talking about Daniel Bellinger. He's part of that draft class. Dane Belton, who got some opportunities late last season when Jason Pinnock got hurt. So, all of these things you've got to see now come to fruition, but it can't be 2 good games out of this guy, 3 good games out of that guy. It's got to be you can bank on, you can hang your hat on production out of a cluster of 7 to 8 guys. That's how teams take the next step forward. So it's more than just the 2024 draft. With that being said, I think that'll wrap up shop here on Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. So we'll have a show from our studios here on Monday, then Tuesday through Friday from the Combine in Indianapolis, and everything is 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We're trying to make it as easy as humanly possible on you. You don't need to change your clocks. You don't need to adjust your schedule.
Or just download it on the app after the show's over.
That's true.
That too. The archive is always there. The archive is always there.
See, even if you miss the program live, we do actually make it easy on you. So I should have started by patting ourselves on the back.
Yes.
But I decided to make it more
podcast platforms everywhere.
There you go. We test Paul after the show ends if he can name every single platform that you can access this program.
I fail.
Well, you did pretty good on the fly here, though. So I will say you passed with some flying colors. Today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcasts. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest. Enjoy the weekend. We'll speak to you on Monday right here at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a good one.